Hello and welcome to the Ryoho Wellness Podcast. This is Margit Jefferson and I am here with Andrei Gospodarczyk, the founder of Ryoho. The vision behind Ryoho Wellness is to create a tipping point in wellness worldwide, and this podcast will contribute towards that. In each episode, we explore different health issues that present as case studies in Andrei's practice. They range from everyday common health problems through to extremely serious health issues and illnesses. We explore body parts and how they respond to nutrition and environment, and we work on inspiring people to change their life for good through an everyday wellness focus. Ryoho is a wellness modality that is unique because it focuses on healing and wellness through basic food and exercises that maneuver the body back to a state of balanced health. People literally jump out of their skin with energy and vitality when they follow Ryoho. And it's an incredible turnaround for many who have had low energy for years through to people who have had complex health issues that don't seem to budge. The podcast is an interview format and ranges from 20 to 60 minutes. And if you'd like more of an introduction on Andrei, please see the 3-minute introduction in the first podcast on the homepage. And at the end, I'll be here to give you a little bit more information. So without further ado, let's get into this episode. I was reflecting on the spring podcast we did in early spring a few months ago, where you inspired a lot of people because of your passion for the spring season, including all the possibility and magic it delivers to the world. So now for summer, can you tell us what you love about this season?
Summer is a wonderful time of extra energy and lightness. The city comes alive. It's an absolute joy. People become more gregarious. Now, what that means is they're more outgoing. Yes, it's a product of the sun and it's a product of the warmth and it's a product of the longer days, but that also happens in us. And extra sun, that extra light, that extra warmth energizes us in a particular way, and that's what I want to talk about.
How does it energize us in a particular way?
Having more warmth and light around, we become more energized by that in a very specific way. The circulatory system becomes more fluid. People who have lower back problems, nervous disorders, and stress, finding that balanced out. In other words, our muscles relax and the sympathetic nervous system unwinds a little bit, and that's very rewarding for people. People who have extreme versions of it, of course, are very happy lying on a beach day after day after day and in the sun. That's very comfortable for them because it's making balance for tightness in the muscles. In other words, the warm sun, the long days, the extra energy that comes from that makes balance for tension and stress. So that's very rewarding for a lot of people, and it makes them a little bit happier, a little bit lighter. A lot more is going on than that, of course. So different organs work at different times of the year, same as different organs and different systems work at different times of the day. Certain organs are more productive in the morning, certain organs are more productive in the afternoon, and certainly some organs are completely shut down at night, and that's why it's hard to stay awake. Your body clock can change a little bit, but generally the organs have a cycle, a pattern, the same way that we have a yearly pattern. And the summer cycle is all about creating circulation, easiness and flow, and that comes from having strength in the blood. But if your blood isn't strong enough, you feel much more comfortable in the summer. One of the questions you'll be asked by seeing a natural therapist or Chinese medical practitioner is, do you like summer more or do you like winter more? Do you like warm more or do you like cold more? And that defines you as being in a particular state. So some people like the summer more, some people like the winter more. And most of us will say, oh my God, how could you like the winter more? But there are a lot of people who do. They like the colds better and they prefer that. They feel too hot in the summer. And that's an imbalance. We should feel comfortable in both, of course. Feeling more comfortable in the summer comes from the fact that your slightly weak blood is more functional in the summer. We need stronger blood and more mineral-rich blood in the winter months to keep us warm. On the other hand, if your blood isn't that good and you're feeling warmer, more energized by the summer, then your weak blood is not burdened as much, so you feel a little bit more comfortable. It's like not having to do anything when you have a headache or back pain and you just relax, and that's more comfortable for you because there's no burden. So, what happens in the summer months is that your blood and your circulatory system are less burdened. But on the other hand, when it gets very, very hot, this can be taxing also. And we need a circulatory system that is active in moving the heat away, especially out of the head. So there's little dangers there to try to be aware of, and wearing things like a hat of some kind or carrying an umbrella or staying in the shade is not a bad idea for some people if they have weak blood. And you can tell when a person has weak blood because they're missing that rosy or summery complexion. They're pale, they have pale lips, and their hands are cold to the touch. On the other hand, if you have an excess of that summer fire in you, it might be a dangerous time for you where you get too much heat also, and so you can overstress. So if you're a very red-faced person and you have capillaries bursting on your face and especially capillaries bursting in your eyes, you might find that going into the hot sun leads to all sorts of problems like heart attacks or strokes. Now, the majority, I believe, of heart attacks happen in the summer because we overheat and the blood can't move that heat away quickly from the different parts of your body and disperse it and cool you down. But being able to sweat freely is a good thing, and having a good lymphatic and pillary function in your body is a very, very good thing. So let's summarize all those little ideas about the health, and then we can talk more about the wonders of summer. So, but just be a little bit careful in the heat. If you have a rosy red face, a red nose, and burst blood vessels in your eyes or very red eyes, it means your blood is concentrated in your head, and the hot sun might create some problems, too much heat in your brain and in your chest, and that's a little bit dangerous for you. So reducing animal products will cool you down, and having more summer foods is a wonderful thing, which is more vegetables and salads, of course. And for the other people who are very, very pale and weak, they feel more comfortable in the sun and much more relaxed, and they love the heat and they are very comfortable with that. But also you have weak blood, and so you might burn easily in your skin, and also you might find that it creates skin disorders, things like sun cancers and this sort of trouble, because your blood's not strong enough to move your acids around and your toxins around and disperse them. So there's dangers with being either too hot a person or too cold a person, and making balance is not a difficult thing. You just need to understand your body's needs and understand how it works and nurture it back into a state of balance so it's flexible enough to deal with changing circumstances and changing environment. Human beings are flexible naturally, and it's made them an exception on the planet where they can live in any climate zone. And we should have that flexibility. When you become very unwell, though, you become very fussy, and you need very specific foods and a very specific environment, and you're uncomfortable with any little changes, whether it's temperature or even movement or environment of some kind where you're used to having certain things around you. People who are healthy are very, very flexible. They can handle changing circumstances. They have an optimistic viewpoint towards even illness, let alone job changes and relationship changes. So being healthy is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Understanding yourself and understanding the seasons is one of the first steps that Ryoho looks at in trying to get people to relate to themselves and have an awareness of our changes. Now, we can't keep eating the same way all year. Of course, we eat lighter food in summer and we eat heavier food in winter. A lot of people following sort of strict diets or some sort of system, and that's okay, but balance is extremely important for your body type, and balance is also very important for the season. In summer, we're much, much more active, but we need even less food than we do in winter because our energy comes from the sun. And I recommend very strongly using less salt, but a little bit is still necessary to break down food and make it assimilable for human beings. And I also recommend reducing animal products or avoiding them altogether. And maybe having a higher quantity of vegetables and a little bit less grain, and leaning towards grains that are more suitable to the hotter climates. Things like corn and corn products like polenta, things like brown rice and products made from brown rice like noodles, and also making different kinds of stir fries using oils. And there's wheat is very suitable for summer also, especially as a flour, and avoiding things like buckwheat and millet. They can make you a little bit too hot. People who eat too much salt and having very heavy foods like grains that are very warming, like buckwheat, unless it's cooked with apple and made into a dessert. That's where you have to really know what you're doing when it comes to these sorts of foods. But as a general idea, move towards vegetables and salads. All right, so there's the health aspects. Then there's an understanding of how summer actually works. Now, what happens in summer is that the heart gets energized, and the heart constrictor or the pericardium function, which is the veins and arteries, plus also the small intestine function gets energized and becomes very active in the summer months. And there's another function called the triple heater, which regulates our immune system, which is the white blood cells. Gets involved in the skin and the capillaries a lot, and also the inner cortex of the brain, our thinking system. Now, all of these things put together are very exciting functions. This is what makes us very excited as human beings. The ability to communicate is the fire function. In Indian medical systems, there's a thing that we describe as Agni. Agni is fire, and of course, fire is foremost in summer. That idea of Agni also is reflected in the digestive system with the small intestine function, where it creates fire in the belly and creates heat to process food. Now, interestingly enough, is that Agni is also the same word that they use for intellect. Now, putting all those ideas together, it's very simple for people who understand how the body works, is that fire quality makes us more thinking, more digesting, and more circulating in an environment that's warmer. So we tend to communicate more. We tend to have more productive and versatile digestive system, and we tend to have a more active brain. So think of it like the daytime as opposed to the nighttime. So the daytime is the time of being more active, digesting foods, and communicating more. The nighttime is more for relaxing, being still, reflecting, and even sleeping. And so think of the summer months as much more active. Now, anyone living in a temperate zone climate knows that the city is quite dull in the winter. We get used to that. We get comfortable with that. Everyone's fine. We see people. It's great. But then the summer months hit, and suddenly the city comes to life, and it's wonderful. There's festivities, there's holidays, of course. Everyone starts laughing and talking and communicating. People become more active in terms of sports. Yes, of course, this is a product of having more sun, but that's what we're talking about. And yes, of course, it's a product of things being warmer and the sun staying up later and we're on holidays, but they all go together. Now, enjoying that warmth and that heat, what it creates is a better circulatory system. And this internal circulatory system, as it improves and becomes more functional because of the extra warmth, we communicate better because our internal dialogue is better. And then the external dialogue improves also. Our internal functions totally govern our external functions. Whatever happens inside your body is how we behave outside. So having more fire in us and around us, we become much more gregarious, like I said, much more functional in terms of communication and much more connected to people around. And that happy, laughing, joyful time is a time for us to really celebrate and enjoy the abundance that nature provides. There's a normal cycle of abundance in summer as the food ripens and grows and becomes full, the same way that we become full and we ripen and we grow as people and as a community. It's a great time of change. It's a great time of connection. And it's a great time to heal old wounds. It's a great time to just sit and talk to your mother. Just sit and talk to your auntie that you haven't spoken to in a long time. Maybe get in touch with relatives or friends that you haven't spoken to in a long time. So it's an important time to make use of that communication ability. We become much more relaxed, much more open, our heart's open. We're capable of connecting with people in a much more productive, efficient, and comfortable way. It's difficult when you're internalizing and reflecting inwards during the winter season. Even though you might be living in a warmer climate in the tropics, there's still a seasonal process. And even though it's not so obvious, but there's still a seasonal process. But you're having, of course, summer all day long. And some of us are living in snowbound climates where you only have very, very short time. But still, there's a certain time when there's more sun. And then it's a much quieter environment in that winter time. But that cycle is still there, where you have more sun at one part of the year and more cold at another time of the year. And we can adapt our bodies and feed our bodies and enjoy those times, especially if we understand what's going on. So we can make use of those functions that pop up at that time, heal our hearts, heal our histories. One of the big issues with the heart and the circulatory system is understanding ourselves. So it's a great time to heal ourselves in our own understanding. Now, what I'm suggesting is that we sit and talk to our loved ones and really open our hearts and be very clear about what we want to say and just start talking and expressing our fears, expressing our nature, expressing our ideas about ourselves. And you'll be absolutely shocked at how it unfolds. Just like the flowers, just like the plants around you, just like the abundance that you're seeing in the summer months. So summer is a time of abundant food because everything has a chance to ripen then. The seeds are sown in spring, and it's summer where we reap and enjoy the benefits of that plant growth. And it also is in us, that warmth and that sun. We can reap the fruits of our efforts, and just having that abundance around us energetically with the warmth and the heat and the possibilities in our hearts and our circulatory systems, we can dig into ourselves and create a lot of joy and love and happiness around us just by connecting. The connectivity of the heart through the circulatory system, the connectivity with the outside world through our external systems of the capillaries and the lymphatic system, and the abundance generated by our digestive system can all combine into making us much more outward and warm and connecting with people. We can drop our defenses and just relate a little bit more to the ones around us and expose ourselves as to our true nature and not be so scared about talking about the things and sharing the things and having other people accept those things very easily around us. So you'll see that that's very possible in summer. Some of you have been working on yourselves a little bit in spring and maybe even a little bit in winter, and you'll now be able to reap extra abundance. So what I'm suggesting is talking more, going out more, and staying up a little bit later, sleeping a little bit less, and enjoying foods that are much, much lighter. My warnings to you, please avoid animal products. They'll make you too hot. Reduce your salt intake a little bit and try very hard to enjoy the oils and the salads and the fruits of the food around you. Now, when I say fruit, try and eat local fruit. Try not to have too much fruit from in the environments that are not yours. So if you're living temperate or a colder climate, try not to have tropical. And when you do eat fruits, just be careful not to have too much. It's a strong thing, and it's best to eat them in desserts. Cook them. A great idea is cooking them. Baked apples, yum, yum.
Wow, there's so much amazing content in that, Andre, and I was listening intently to every word you were saying and holding on to as much as I could about it. There are a couple of things that I've noted down that I'd like to go back and unpack a little bit and explore with you. And I'm just wondering if we can start off with this first idea that I've jotted down. First thing that I want to talk about is the 3 or 4 categories of people that you mentioned. The first category are the people who are far more comfortable in winter and find it difficult to deal with summer. And it doesn't have to be very hot or very humid, but this group of people just don't like summer. The second category are the people who are potentially in real danger during the hot summer months. They're terribly affected by the heat, cannot seem to cool, and we read every year of people who have died in heat waves. And then the third category that I jotted down, and for the purposes of this discussion, people who find it okay to be in the heat. These are the people who love baking in the sun on the beach or by the pool, not get enough of the hot weather, and will always seek out the sun for warmth and tanning. I find it very interesting that people can be so different. And so can you start with those in our community who are much more comfortable in winter than summer?
Those people, they're usually red-faced, more thick-set. They are robust individuals. So you'll see them in winter sometimes walking around in shorts and singlets even, and in the extreme, and they just don't feel the cold. Now, those individuals are comfortable with very low temperatures, down to 2 or 3, and it's sleety, and they're very, very comfortable in the cold. Their body is balancing out and burning up excessive amounts of animal products, but also they have a constitutional strength of heaviness, and unctuousness is what we call it. So when you add more heat, because they're already generating a lot of heat, and you take away the cold, which is sucking the heat out of them, it can be a little bit dangerous for them. And those individuals should be very, very careful. They will drink enormous amounts of alcohol as the summer months progress. If they happen to live in a southern climate on the northern hemisphere, or a northern climate in the southern hemisphere, in other words, a hot climate, they cannot help but drink enormous amounts of liquid, usually beer. That will negate some of the dangerous aspects of the excess heat in them, usually generated by, like I said, eating enormous amounts of animal products, but also combining that with, in some cases, with heavy-set constitutional types where they're a little bit blocky, not frail or elfin-shaped. Their heads are a little bit more square, their shoulders and their hands a little bit more square, and you can always pick them because their faces are more red. Now, those sort of people really need to know that they can lighten themselves up and feel a lot better in the summer months and avoid the dangers of summer by reducing animal products. Animal products are okay in an extremely cold climate. You can burn it up, but you're not even just cold, you have to be also very active. And then you can make use of the enormous energy that animal products provide in a very particular way. There's lots and lots of energy available to us from grains and vegetables, of course, but it's a slow release energy, and we need much less of it, and the body deals with it in a very different way. So as a summation, lean towards salads and vegetables, reduce animal products, including eggs and heavy cheeses, things like yellow cheddar and those sorts of strong cheeses, which of course are going to be very rich food sources. Reduce those rich food sources, because in the summer we need a lot less food. People go for the whole day without eating and just having a drink or a little piece of fruit or a little bit of salad. And we forget, we've got very short memories, some of us, that feeling in the middle of summer as opposed to the feeling in winter, the amount of food we eat in winter as opposed to the amount of food, and yet we have much more energy in the summer. People forget, they have very short-term memories about these sort of things. My suggestion is things like white noodles with cucumbers, and even the way they're presented, like on a glass plate with ice cubes and peas and the cucumber slices all around the noodles, and make a dipping sauce from ginger and a little bit of shoyu and vinegar. And it's a wonderful meal for everyone to just enjoy in those extremely hot days. But if you're going to sit down and carve up a duck or a turkey or a pig in the middle of summer, you're going to put your life in danger, especially if you're being very active and playing sports. You'll crave far too much liquid, far too much beer. Your stomach will hurt. You'll pass out. You'll go into food comas. On the other hand, lovely light food, big meals, stir fries, maybe a little bit of animal product sprinkled throughout it in the summer months. enjoying some lighter animal products like fish and fowl rather than pork and beef. It's much more sensible, and reducing it right down. It's an obvious thing to do. So I hope that has clarified something there for people who feel much more comfortable in the winter. There's still quite a few of you out there, not as many as before. People's conditions have shifted, and because of the modern processed diet, people are generating children now, breeding children now that are much taller and lighter and slimmer, not so squat and short and heavy set as they used to. So we're all taller than our parents, aren't we?
What about people who aren't noticeably overweight, who might be quite trim or, maybe carrying a bit of weight, but not really, who find it very difficult in the heat and who don't like the extreme temperatures and humidity and the dry heat and would much prefer to be in 24, 25 degrees for the whole summer? What's going on with those type of people?
So you obviously know some of those people, as do I. Now, you've got to remember that some people actually move countries or cities for the climate because they have conditions like asthma, for example, or some kind of other breathing difficulty, or for their heart condition. There's all sorts of reasons that people will move. As they become more elderly and their circulatory systems start to collapse a little bit, very few of them move into a colder climate. Most of them move to a warmer climate. So you'll see usually the warmer parts of a country, especially near the water where the cool air can keep it just the right temperature, is full of retirement homes because they move there for their health. Now, this can happen to a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old. What they have is a condition where their circulatory system isn't very functional. That circulatory system can be part of the lymphatic, the capillary, or the arteries and veins. It all depends. And there's very poor communication there for them in those areas, so they don't circulate their energy very well. They might not be ruddy and thick-set, but those people have just as much danger, which is why I was saying earlier, it's dangerous to eat a lot of meat in the heat. It can create problems. Even the young, slim-looking people, they only show little signs of these conditions. They know how to balance it well. They can cope. They're not showing their body constitution isn't really heavy, but they have a condition. And it's not uncommon now for young men in their 30s to have heart disease and heart attacks. And in fact, young women now in their 40s and 50s, it's the biggest killer now. Heart disease is a massive problem now. And it's going to show up again this summer, of course. But you don't have to be heavy set. You can have a certain condition and not just the overall type. You might just have a circulatory problem. It shows as not being able to adapt to temperature changes very easily, and this is a common symptom that we see. One of the things I ask people when I diagnose and I see this condition, I say, do you feel temperature changes very easily? And they say, yeah, I can't stand the heat or the cold, or I'm much more comfortable in the cold and I hate the heat. And so they have this condition and they feel very uncomfortable in the heat, and they're always having the air conditioning on and cooling themselves down. So yes, it is common, and they have a condition, and there are things they should do to fix that up, and that includes stretching and creating flow in their bodies, having cold showers every day and exercising and stretching their skin. It's a really good idea to learn how to really stretch your spine out, stretch your body out, make the chest lift up, which is the seat of the circulatory system, make it open. And that happens from creating good core pressure. And the last little bit of advice for those people is please avoid heavy animal products and sugar. They have to avoid sugar also because that damages the circulatory system. And of course, cigarettes clog up the circulatory system. It creates so much constriction and toxicity in the circulatory system that the blood pressure goes up. So it's a combination of things usually, but it's interesting to come across those sort of people and ask them to, for me anyway, and ask them to change their diet just a little bit and do a tiny little bit of exercise, and then they don't have those cravings for sugar and they feel so much better. Suddenly temperature changes are not a big problem for them because they're not sick, they just have a condition.
Great. Okay. And what about people who absolutely love summer? So the hotter the better. It doesn't matter whether it's dry heat or humid heat. but they absolutely love it, can't get enough of it.
We've met people like this. I know one in particular in a country town that I lived in for a long time. And the hotter the better. It was well into the 40s and it was baking and it was a heat wave. It was unbearable. And this one individual would be actually in the garden digging away and happy as. And I'd say, how can you do that? He said, I feel great. The hotter the better. And he just loved it. And we might know those sort of people. Of course, he had a very serious condition. His health was terribly compromised and he hated the cold and suffered and was grumpy all year except for when it was incredibly hot. So it's an illness. He'd already had one heart attack and had severe bowel problems and all sorts of other conditions and a great attraction to certain drugs and lots of wine. Usually these sort of people love a warmer climate and love the heat and totally incapable of handling the cold weather at all, and it shows. There's a lot of hippies around that have a lot of marijuana and lots of sugar and lots of honey and lots of fruit juice, binge on sugar from their drug habits, and they all move to the warm climate, don't they? Very few of them will move to colder climates. That's a rarity. You'll find them on the beaches in India where it's at the perfect temperature, a little bit hot, too hot for me, and maybe in northern Australia or on the beaches in Western America, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of these people around. They're much more common than the overheating person now. It's the state of the world, isn't it? As we sit around more and eat more sugar and have more chemicals and have, unfortunately, labelled recreational drugs, which I just consider drugs, and they become weaker and the blood colder and they become more fragile and needing that extra support of the warmth around them. Of course, those people need to become more robust and have things like sea salt in their cooking and medicines like sesame seeds and salt ground together, and B vitamin foods, which are things like miso soup, and avoiding fruit and juices to get back to balance. We shouldn't depend upon the environment to be exactly correct. People don't need to have always the air conditioning going. Of course, when you're sick, you do, and that's the way the world is now. And so we use an enormous amount of energy to maintain our equilibrium, but it's using enormous amounts of resources and it's very wasteful. If we're a little bit healthy, that's no big deal with the temperature changes. We don't need the air conditioning on all the time. We don't need to complain about the weather all the time. A little bit of rain, a little bit of cold, a little bit of sun, all of these have their benefits. But as we get sick, and even if you're young and you have that pale skin, lack of blood from overindulgence of all sorts of chemicals, including sugar, and maybe having an unbalanced vegetarian diet, feeling the cold terribly and basking in the sun and having the capacity to just lie on a beach all day, that's a sign.
Very interesting, that concept of balance, and I think there's probably a lot of people who haven't really thought about that and how they respond to the season. But it does lead me to think about people who live in the Arabic states where it's extremely hot, people who live even in northern Australia, in southern Italy, or likewise people who live in close to the Arctic Circle. They live in extreme temperatures. And if they then go to the opposite of that, even within Australia, if the northerners go down to Melbourne or Tasmania, they absolutely freeze. And likewise, if people who go from Tasmania go and set up shop in Singapore, a lot of people find it very difficult with the humidity and the heat. So is that an adaptation, or would those people also not be 100% well in terms of Ryoho wellness?
It can take a little time to adjust. You'll find that you start eating the local food if you've moved countries, and that'll adapt you to that environment very quickly. You'll find that you become accustomed to the pace of the environment. So you usually go to hot countries, like you said, in Singapore and other places like this, and people are much more leisurely, much more comfortable. The southern Italians, as you mentioned, much more passionate, or say hot. And the northern Italians are renowned for being a little bit more reserved as individuals. And you'll find that in comparing countries, even though the people are very nice in Tasmania and Canada, as we know, they're apologetic and sweet and friendly and comfortable to be around, but not as gregarious and outgoing as people in warmer climates. They're much more family oriented, much more socially oriented, not so easily bursting into song and laughter and party and music and dancing. I mean, you go to hot countries in parts of Spain, or if you go to Arab cultures, everyone's just doing very, very little. They just sit around and sit around and sit around and sit around. You know, hot countries like India, hot southern countries like Italy. I remember very clearly my yoga teacher talking to Italian and saying, you're very lazy people, and only lazier people are Indians. But you can make use of this laziness by having a lot of fun. So, yeah, it depends what country you adapt. You can easily spend 3 months adapting to a change in climate. It's even when you change your diet to a healthier diet, it can take 4 seasons for your body to adapt to that new way of eating, even if you haven't moved cities. One of the reasons people move cities is for their health, because you can change the external environment to make your internal environment more balanced and comfortable. But also changing your internal environment can take up to a season or 2 or 3 seasons, but generally a whole year. Go through all 4 seasons first, and then you feel very, very comfortable with your new diet. And you can sometimes, in changing your diet, feel a little bit less comfortable in a summer, because you're not eating as much fruit and juices, or a little bit colder in the winter because you're asking your body to stay warm with less animal products. So they're interesting concepts to mull over a little bit.
Yeah, very interesting. The weather patterns change and the light patterns change also, and many countries go on daylight savings, particularly in the northern and southern hemisphere, not so much around the equator. What impact does that extra light have on a person's system during summer?
That extra light, extra sun, the traditional idea is to keep your energy in the winter. Walk around as if you've got a secret and keep that energy back a little bit. And you'll find that mindset in northern European countries, that people are walking around and maintaining a mindset of a little bit held back, a little bit cautious, like in England or northern India or Canada or Tasmania, whereas maybe New Zealand, where it's a little bit cooler, and as it gets even colder countries, your energy just withdraws a little bit and you keep your energy to yourself a little bit. And that's the right mindset for making balance for that environment. But as you increase the daylight hours, then you become much more expansive and you give everything away. And so exhaust yourself, use up your energy, say ridiculous things, take chances, start new businesses, try and be productive and take on those challenges and reap the benefits of that extra energy around you. The universe is bathing you in unlimited amounts of energy, and that there's very little time to sleep. Reduce your sleeping time and be comfortable with that. And if you're using your energy the right way and using it all up and knowing that you're going to get a lot more the next day and you're going to feel warm and comfortable and feeling abundant. And in temperate climate, you do feel that. There's a very big difference between the summer and the winter. And when it gets far too hot, then you start to shut down and you can't go out in the middle of the day. And you'll see that traditional cultures between early afternoon or late morning and then mid-afternoon, they shut down because it's just too hot. And you'll go to countries like Mexico and certain parts of Europe. And of course, you'll go to places like India where it gets very hot in those parts of the country, some parts of India. And you will see people just shut down for the day, late morning to early afternoon, because it's dangerous to be out in that extreme heat. The same way as it's dangerous to be out in the extreme cold, and it creates too much imbalance in us. So it's sensible not to be out there. But the extra sun is giving you huge amounts of energy. The longer hours are out there. It stimulates your digestive system, as I said. It creates energy for you, so you need a lot less food. So it affects us in those simple ways of making us much more open, creating the circulatory system functions that maybe are a bit weaker in us. And if we're challenged with our circulatory systems, now is the time to heal them, spread your wings, so to speak, and embrace those around us. Open your chest, open your heart, open your arms, and enjoy the warmth. You don't even have to try. You just have to be aware that it's there and use it. And don't mind talking to people and to strangers and expressing your opinions. And people are very willing at this time of year to talk about things. Now, creating problems for yourself by having too much alcohol is not good. Alcohol stimulates the circulatory system, which is why people do all the things I'm talking about when they drink too much alcohol, which is they talk too much, they're overly friendly and overly social. That becomes a bit too much. And so keep the alcohol low. It's a treat. It's not something that you do every day. The only reason you want to drink a lot of alcohol is to create the feeling in the summer months of what we all deserve and should be excited by, which is more friendly and laughing and having fun. But you don't need to have alcohol at all even. It's there already. If you go to a party and try not to drink alcohol and just walk around with a glass of mineral water with a bit of lemon in it and pretend that it's vodka or something, you'll see that you get just as silly and loud and happy and gregarious and comfortable as everyone else who's drunk, except without becoming obnoxious with the next drink. So enjoy the summer, just lap up that energy. If it gets too hot, don't go and sit in the sun. It's not good for your health to sit in the middle of the day sun. Those people who can do that and feel comfortable with that, they've obviously got a little weakness there, but we do things that are comfortable for us. It's normal and it's easy to do for those people. That's great.
That leads nicely on to what drinks are good summer drinks, good summer liquids to have.
The traditional one that we recommend is barley. Barley has the impact of cooling you down. So you can buy barley tea, much easier to make it. You just get a handful of barley and dry roast it until it's almost black, just that very deep brown, and then simmer it for 5 minutes. There you go. Let it cool down. Maybe even add a little bit of apple juice to it on the really hot days. Barley tea is a fabulous cooling agent. It's just wonderful. There's all sorts of things like mint, and if you go to any hot culture like southern India, you'll find that there's spicy drinks, things like cloves and ginger, and they create dilation in the circulatory system and make the blood flow more freely for those people who need that kind of thing. Go on your taste. Of course, bancha, cookie cha, hoji cha, a little bit of green tea. Green tea is very cooling. It pulls the heat out of your liver. It may be even too cooling for some people. So a little bit of green tea, not a bad idea. And it also makes you very chatty and outward going. They're useful things. And they're great little teas. Of course, adding a little pinch of fruit like a chopped up strawberry in a cup of tea or some water. It's interesting for people to remember that Grandma would have said a hot drink cools you down a lot more than a cold drink. And having icy drinks might seem attractive, but actually causes a little bit of damage. It cools the digestive system down too much. It might sound a bit precious, but try it and see how you feel with maybe a warm barley tea. and see what that does for you on a very, very hot day. Serve it to your friends. Maybe something like apple juice and bancha tea is a good idea. Maybe bancha tea with just a couple of pieces of watermelon cut up and thrown into it. These work great on a very hot day. As a regular tea throughout the summer months, bancha is fantastic. Barley tea, if you're in a very hot climate, fantastic. You can't lose. Filtered water, you'll be very comfortable with any one of those three. You can just live on bancha tea all the year round, of course.
What foods are great summer foods to be eating? And I know that you've touched on them throughout the episode so far, but let's summarize it because listeners will be very interested.
There are different body types. There are different conditions, and it all depends where you're living. But we can generalize, which is lean towards more vegetable type foods and don't go too far. It's quite shocking for me, and I'm sure very comfortable for everyone, but shocking for me to see as soon as the hot weather hits, and it can hit quite suddenly, is people start drinking tons of fruit juice. You're going to have a problem. You're in a transition stage. Now, just go gently. In traditional cultures, you'll always see them have some festivity. The beginning of summer is a festival. The first day of summer or the beginning of summer, something will happen where in Asia, for example, they all just have a couple of pieces of watermelon and some cooked eel or something and do a particular dance and share some rituals of some kind. Those are just simple little steps to ease us into the seasonal change. Our cultures, most of us have dropped all of those things or forgotten the meaning of the particular festival. We're far too busy working, of course. We need to have some transition process. If you're shifting your diet in spring a little bit towards simple foods, cutting down the animal products, then that transition is much easier. But for a lot of us, it's just heavy meat eating, and then summer comes and we start heavy drinking and lots of fruit and lots of juices, and we end up burdening our bodies enormously. You're hurting yourself, and it's much easier to just go through those seasonal transitions of, in springtime, reduce your animal products and transition to the summer months. In spring, there's not so many animals around. We don't want to kill the babies. We don't want to kill the pregnant mothers. In winter, the animals are more abundant. You'll find that the food is scarcer, and traditionally the hunter-gatherer will find it easier to find a young male that's been kicked out of the herd, or the old animal or the sick animal is lagging a little bit and not keeping up with the herd, and they're easier to catch. And so there's an abundance of animal life that is available food-wise. Now, that's how our bodies are programmed, to have a little bit more animal product in winter and a lot less in summer. If you're eating a lot of animal product in summer, you're going to have problems, meaning that you'll crave far too much liquid, far too much beer, far too much fruit, sugar and honey, and you're going to run into problems that are associated with excessive animal product eating, including feeling the heat too much, getting grumpy, getting irritable, and developing problems like lower back and bowel issues. And so there's an abundance of bowel issues now because of this. Summertime is a great cleaning out time and just creating circulation and letting go of everything and just basking in the warmth. So lean towards much more vegetables. Go vegetarian in summer. Have very little animal product. I mean, some of you maybe need a little bit of animal product because you have a condition and you need to keep your minerals up. But using things like bone broth to cure a particular condition or something, but that's only a short-term thing. Better to focus on not having a lot of animal products. Better to focus on having a lot more vegetables and being very creative with them. You'll be surprised if you let yourself get a little bit hungry, not eat all day long, have a proper breakfast where it's a little bit lighter. Making things like you'll find in warmer climates where people are making chapatis, which is just a little bit of flour and salt. Make a dough and roll it out a little bit, throw it in a frying pan with some oil and put stuff on it. It's wonderful. You can even buy them pre-made and different versions of these simple wheat products. Having very light breakfasts of just a bowl of soup. on very hot days, you can make a wonderful light soup out of cucumber and miso and shoyu. And going towards a vegetarian lunch of some sort, which is very simple, brown rice and just some fresh salads of some kind with celery and lettuce and sprouts, which are maybe pickled overnight. There's wonderful ideas and recipes available to everyone. Different salads, and they're great. Salads are abundant, and you can just buy a salad and throw it on the brown rice that you brought with you. And then no one feels like eating lots of food on a very hot night. And those sorts of ideas of just having simple, light noodles, maybe a soup, maybe something like corn or polenta, and using oil cools you down. It heats you up, makes you feel hot in one way, but it also cools you down at the same time. And using a little bit of fruit in the cooking, maybe some berries or sultanas, and if you add a tiny little bit of salt, it'll stop you from getting tired. So throwing a little bit of fruit in with the food is not a bad idea, especially if it's really, really hot. So there's some simple ideas nutritionally, and that'll help enormously. Enjoy the summer.
And that wraps it up for today. And we hope you've enjoyed this episode just as much as we've enjoyed putting it together for you. Any listeners who would like to learn more about Andre's work or Ryoho can connect and follow on Instagram and LinkedIn using the address of Ryoho Wellness. We spell Ryoho Ryoho and then add wellness on the end, obviously. Episode notes will be loaded up and available at ryohowellness.com, which is the master website. And just a few more things before you take off. Number 1, do you have a health issue or question you would like explored in one of our podcasts? Please submit it to us at the website where there is a contact page, ryohowellness.com website. Number 2, would you enjoy being notified by very short email every time we do something on Ryoho Wellness? This includes notification of our up-and-coming wellness podcasts and other things towards our tipping point. If you want to receive that, go to ryohowellness.com and drop in your email address and you'll get the very next one. And we hope you really enjoy it. Thanks everyone for listening, and thank you, Andre, for another fantastic episode. See you next time.